Blighty, thanks for joining us for Suns in Cars. We're going to have a bit of a look at your life in football and everything that goes on with that, your playing, your coaching, and now your time at the Suns.
Who thought of this idea, Josh?
Well, it's thanks to our good friends at FIAT, so one of our major sponsors.
Yeah.
So just a sort of a good concept to blend the two together and get a bit of an insight into one of the game's greats, one of our ornaments. So it's a great opportunity to learn a bit more about yourself, and we'll do this segment regularly and learn about the people behind the players, because it's only one side of the story, isn't it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, they're the major part of the play, but yeah, the players are important. But yeah, there's a lot of people here now. There's probably 120, and I joined back in July '09 on the board, of course, to start with. So I think there was about 10 people here then. So it's grown fantastically, yeah.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So we'll kick off and we'll talk about your playing career to start with, because it's quite interesting, even though it was a little bit of a long time ago now. You spent 6 seasons at Woodville and the Sandful before coming across to North Melbourne.
Yep.
Can you tell us the reasons why it took so long to come across the North, and the reasons why you did come, because the Sandful is a strong competition?
Yeah, look, and that's exactly right. Growing up in Adelaide, as I did, my local heroes were Adelaide people. Melbourne was a place far, far away, obviously a lot different today. And the Victorian clubs, although they had 12 teams, we had a really healthy competition in Adelaide, so many of the Adelaide guys didn't move, and the Victorian clubs had 2 Form 4s, they used to call them, where they could sign 2 interstate players. So over a number of years they signed some from South Australia, not a lot from Western Australia and Tasmania. So yeah, it was mainly because you were reluctant to leave, because you were quite happy where you were. But eventually the lure of, after playing some state football and doing okay in Adelaide, I thought, I wouldn't mind trying myself over there, over the border. You
spent 9 years at North Melbourne before going back over to Woodville. You're probably one of the best people to talk about how you can compare the 2 competitions. You won a Magarey and a Brownlow. How did the 2 compare?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. You get lucky in those things, whether you get a 3 or 2 or 1. But in Adelaide, of course, I was pretty going 21-22 when I won it. So you've gone from this, I guess, this young suburban kid at Woodville to being front page of the Advertiser, the local paper. So that was pretty mind-boggling. But you gradually settle down, and of course in Melbourne, probably most would say the better comp because of the population. 4 times as many as Adelaide. So to eventually win it there by narrow margin, but nevertheless won it, was pretty special also.
What prompted you to move back to Adelaide? You finished your career there?
Yeah, I actually had coached. I'm the last playing coach in the competition, which most people probably can't remember. That's that far back. But so I actually played and coached at North Melbourne, and then it just didn't work out for all those sorts of reasons. So I played the following year and played mainly full forward and kicked 100 goals. And I don't know. I was 32, could still kept on playing in Melbourne, but I guess the challenge of coaching started to really eat at me, because it hasn't worked with, as a playing coach. So I decided to go back to the worst football club in Australia, which happened to be my old club. They'd won 1 game for that year. So I thought, if ever I wanted to do coaching, to take on a club that had won 1 game, you'll soon find out. So I went back and captain coached Woodville, my original club.
You've got a really decorated list of achievements. I'm sure you don't want to go into them, but what's your proudest, your most fondest award that you've received in football?
Yeah, Josh, most people think I'm silly, and half the time they're probably right, but I voted for Port Adelaide in Adelaide initially, and they're now in the AFL, as we know. And then Woodville came into the competition, and I was 9 years of age, so, and I only lived 4 streets from Woodville Oval. So my biggest thrill in football, I've been very lucky, but was to actually play my first ever league game for Woodville. That's where my heroes were. So, I've said that for a long time now. I've been involved in a lot, but that was my boyhood memory. All my dreams come true on that one day. It was unbelievable.
Coaching was a massive part of your life, and you're renowned for your real preparation and almost your obsessive nature with it. How do you describe yourself as a coach?
I'm glad you asked me. Other people would say mad. Not really. I think that one of the things, I really like the technique of the game and trying to help players, obviously get better and with their skill. And, the tactics in the game I really enjoyed. But I suppose it was when you'd say something to a player, and you know, it might just be a training, you know, have you thought about doing this? And then you see them put it in action on a game day, you go, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So perhaps just to influence in some way, small way, a player's future, I guess that just appealed to me.
You had the privilege of coaching Gary Ablett Senior at Cardinia Park, threw up a lot of challenges, and there's one really famous story I'd like you to tell us a little bit about. It was a pre-season training, I think it might have been your first year, involved at a famous bridge in Geelong.
Yeah, yes, I've told it a few times, but it's an interesting story. Gary's training habits were pretty slack at times, and I just got to the club at Geelong, and you know, all the boys were out there slaving, and Gary would seem to turn up when he liked it to, and you know, that wasn't the way I was going to operate. So I told him to meet him at Ballyang Sanctuary, a very famous little spot in Geelong, and they have a little bridge there over the creek of water, and so I asked him to come there, and I stood in the middle of the bridge with him, and I just said to him, look, there's two ways. You can either walk off the bridge and go home, or get your gear, or otherwise I'm going to push you off the bridge. In other words, you're out of the club. And that's pretty much what I said. Thankfully, he went home and got his footy gear and started training again. So, and Gary's history from there on in was quite remarkable at the Cats, and he ended up having a great career, which we're all pleased about.
Geelong had a lot of success under you, even though you didn't taste the ultimate success. But how did you get the most out of characters like Gary Ablett? Was that such a big challenge? Yeah, look, they hadn't. It was fascinating the way, you know, having an opportunity. It was the first time I'd gone away from either Woodville or North Melbourne. You know, I'd played for them, coached both those clubs. So this was the first time I could be Malcolm Blight, me, and that sounds funny, without any baggage. You know, they didn't really know. They knew a bit about me, but certainly not as much about me as the other two clubs. So I guess it was the first time I could be me, and you know, I had some pretty strong guidelines and rules, but I don't know, I'd watched them a year before when I was doing some commentary, and you know, I thought their seconds looked half okay, believe it or not. I used to watch them, and guys like Gary Hocking and Barry Stoneham were in and out the team a bit. They're only young players, but you know, I thought it'd be a real chance. They hadn't played in the finals for 10 or so years, so I just thought there was some, just from the outsider's point of view, it looked as though that they had a bit of talent there, which always helps if you want to coach, mate. If you're ever going to coach, Josh, with a famous name like Gabelich, like yours, if you ever take up coaching, make sure there's a bit of talent around first. And we had a, it was good. I mean, I really enjoyed my time there, and 3 grand finals and a preliminary final. We didn't quite get the chocolates. We, you know, got up against 2 great teams in the Eagles and Hawthorn. So anyhow, six of the best years in footy at Geelong. It was a very different time to today in terms of a lot of the players' kids were around the rooms during training and after games. What do you recall of a young Gary Ablett Jr.?
Yeah, look, he was a real tonic. He was lively. Him and Nathan used to hang around the club a bit. Gary Senior's other son, and I remember just being in a meeting. It was a Sunday. For some unknown reason, we had Sunday, and we just got beaten. And I was pretty annoyed and pretty noisy, I think. So I'm reading the riot act, and 10 minutes into this wonderful soliloquy that I used to do, and with that, the door just burst wide open, and it was Gary Jr. Hey, Dad, when we going home? It just killed the day. It was just priceless. And it was probably a good thing he came in, because I would have talked some more rubbish probably.
I know they're 2 different eras and 2 very different players, but how do you compare the 2 Abletts? They're 2 absolute magicians. Yeah,
I've probably been asked that question as much as any, and it's so hard. If anyone follows horse racing, Bart Cummings, he's won 12 Melbourne Cups, and great man in his own right. Just said champions shouldn't be compared, just enjoyed. And I think the more I think about those words from the great man Bart Cummings, I think that's what the 2 Abletts are. Geez, I've enjoyed them both. They are so different in the way they approach their footy and the way they go about it, and their whole size. But they are just wonderful, wonderful players to watch. It's just wonderful.
I think one thing I've noticed the time I've been up here is how significant Gary Ablett's presence is up here in growing the game. Do you think the Gold Coast SUNS would be in the position they would be in right now if they hadn't have signed Gary Ablett Jr.?
No, I don't think so. I think of all the things that the Suns have done, including, Metricon Stadium, a new TNA block, nearly $200 million of infrastructure on the coast, it's been a great success story. Gary's right up there with all that, absolutely no doubt.